High Rada, Congress of Ukraine, started reviewing Mobilization Bill. How many of them are present, though? Right, I heard there are only about 40 of them present at the session, and I'm not sure if it is even legal to consider any decision made in this context, if they actually can adopt any bill when there's so very few of them in the whole. Do you think people will accept it if they push it through? I don't know, Nikolai, but this is one of the main exams that our country faces at the end of our 30 plus years of freedom. It's the matter of the survival for our country. And the fact that our congressmen treat it this way, I've read recently that somebody smart said that this bill became the worst kind of compromise between the position of military and the position of civilians. Civilians' position to make sure their rights are protected, and military are the ones who want to be decommissioned after having served in this war for already 2 years. So now looking at this, we basically can say that we will not have demobilization, however bitter it sounds, but demobilization right now, if conducted today, if we withdraw several 100,000 of our troops from the front, we will cause a catastrophe for the front. Understandably, this is a very difficult situation for those who serve. 2 years in these conditions, this is destroying your health and everything, even outside of the wounds and people getting killed. But if we remove professionals, the ones who already acquired all the experience, parts of the front will collapse. And then they'll have to go back again, but now they'll be defending our country not near Toretsk and Tokmak, but near Dnieper and Poltava. Do they really want that proposition? There is really no alternative here. And the second point is that this is the worst kind of compromise. This is not in favor of drafting more people, and it is also not in favor of releasing the military from their current duties. So, as somebody said, this is not the law about mobilization, this is the law about future elections. And those congressmen who are adopting this bill, who are structuring it, the way they were voting for it, you can see their concern about their re-elections in that bill. So they're trying to have a chance at next elections. But acting in such a fashion, and you can see definitely it looking through the letter of this bill, and there are only 40 of them left to vote, they're acting contrary to the survival of Ukraine. And that's why I'm suggesting to all congressmen to find it within themselves, find their wits, and everybody who can, make sure you observe and you give a proper verdict to the current state of Congress, to all those who are there, who are not voting, who are voting, who are working on this bill, who are refusing to do so. And now we have, 40, maybe 35 of them left. Not even sure if they'll be voting for it, right? I'm not even talking that for 4 months they've been reviewing it. Before that, there were 5 months of discussion. This is an action contrary to our survival. One can put it in a history that current staffing of our Congress, current set of congressmen, prefers their own interests over the interests of the country. All right, ex-Congressman Igor Lutsenko was giving an interview to Ukrainian Pravda. I'm watching their Telegram channel, and the title of that is Ukrainian elites, all of Ukrainian elites need to be in the front. There has to be more elites on the front than normal people. And this is a congressman who actually fought in this war, who was serving in the intel branch of our military. He is pretty well known. So his formula about involving elites, how correct it is in your view? Well, let's start with the fact that you can never have elites more than commoners in service, because elite by definition is a smaller group. And of course, according to Ukrainian documents, a congressman, even if he is an ex-congressman, he still has the congressman title. He gives a good example in his service, right? It would be good if others would come as well. Otherwise, we have a lot of sportsmen who are dying on the front. Many of them went to serve in the military, professional European world-class champions. And yesterday, an actor died, a very well-known Ukrainian actor. Sorry, I apologize, I can't remember his last name. I'm going for quite a few hours without sleep already, so Nikolai, if you can look up his name. He played over 40 roles, very well-known character in our country. Unfortunately, he perished. Damansky, right? So a lot of actors and actresses are in the front. Half of the Black Square, that theater school I was with, they're already, half of them are serving, and we already have a few who perished. So there are different elites fighting. There is also a charter, a brigade, that is funded by and led by a businessman, by a Ukrainian businessman, multimillionaire. He is on the lists of the most wealthy people, and he is funding and supporting and leading this troop. So I would say not everybody from Ukrainian elites have to be on the front. It's like the story with the National Circus, who were reserved from going and protected from going to the front. And there was a lot of criticism going about them in the society, that you cannot really do that because it's wrong to not let circus people serve in the military. And this is not what's happening. Those people who work in circus, they actually are on the front. I actually have an acquaintance who is there, who recently hijacked Russian tank. He's a well-known gymnast. But the ones who actually were protected were the teachers of the circus academies. The ones who, if they disappear, they won't have anybody to teach and to continue our tradition, our glorious tradition of Ukrainian circus. So, unfortunately, our media attacked that situation without digging deeper, and the only protected part was the teaching part of that industry. And one has to be very careful. There will never be equality across different industries and different branches of economy, because some of them carry very unique knowledge. Let's say, take a good example. Should we call from reserves into the front the specialists in Ukraine energy systems? This is a very unique specialty. The ones who can play our energy system like an organ and switch capacities, switch flows from one damaged line to another in a crucial point. I think they should be awarded and get medals for managing that system in that difficult time. They should not be in the trench, on the battlefront. That's why I'm against sending everybody to the front. There has to be a definite selection. But there are definitely going to be some symbolic inequity with this. Inequality. You can take an example of the Second World War. Where were Stalin's kids, right, during that fight? On the front. Right, Alexey. Right. One died, another was flying as a jet pilot. Where are the sons of Poroshenko? They're adult enough to serve. Poroshenko is a well-known proponent for joining EU and NATO. Where are they? And a lot more questions can be asked from the TV personas, from congressmen. And some people actually made decisions. Some congressmen made a brave decision to go to the front. Like Barlow, congressman from ES party. We were always political opponents. He really disliked me, but I pay my respect to him, even though I considered his position to be wrong and very damaging for Ukraine. But he did go to front, take arms, and fought for our country. That's where you need to stand up and take the head off and put your hand to your heart. So everybody is making his own choice in this difficult situation. Where would he or she be, where the person thinks is the best place for him? And my position is very simple. 3 points. First, not everybody should serve. Second, those people upon whom different branches of economy have critical dependence, like Circus, for example, right, far removed from the major industries of the country. But if they're the backbone of this industry, they should not serve until we maybe go to the partisan format, right, if everything fails. And third, we cannot enforce elites, political or business, to go to front and send their kids to front by force. There shouldn't be a law that obliges the elites to do that. The law should be equal for everybody. And in a country, any country, you can use attorneys and other different systems to avoid going to the front. But what we can do, we can try to foster a habit within our generations and elites and everybody to actually be a responsible citizen. And it probably should be started from the kindergarten. By the way, in this bill, there is a good point, one good point that I saw, that in order to work for the Ukrainian government, you need to have served in the military. So you cannot take a position, especially in the power ministries in our country, without having served in the military in some capacity. So this is a good development. You need to know, you need to have been acquainted with how it works, what doesn't. You need to have some exposure and experience. And then the rest, you start with education from kindergarten to school to universities and general respect within the society, so that a person in a military uniform, even if he is not a professional military, but if the person is ready to die for the country and defend it, this is the elite of the country. De facto, that is an elite. In life, the person can be our opponent, not exactly liked, have some other issues, but if he decided to take arms and defend the country, they automatically join that elite. And it's good that when we try to pay some extra money to those who volunteered, right, to cover some of their debts and provide some remuneration rewards, but it would be fantastic if we could foster proper social mechanisms so that their families would get additional respect and additional opportunities within society. And for example, it would make sense if at some point there is a choice between somebody who served and somebody who didn't. I'm taking a very blunt example. If two businessmen are applying for credit, but there is limited amount, the one who did serve should have priority over the other, right? So this should be an underlying factor in the society. Those people who are eager to stand up for our country and offer their lives in its defense, they are our elite. And this law that we're looking at, what needs to be the mechanism that was needed to be turned, I would say, like you take a screw and screw it by 180-degree rotation. This law may be screwed in by 15 degrees, so barely, but it's still a small step. Not enough, although in the right direction. If to dream a little, this law would have benefits for those who go and stand up for the country, that their families and members of the family will get additional benefits from that decision. But the others who decided not to do so would not be damaged in rights, because there is a discussion about punishing them, limiting their access to banks. That's why I'm against that. I think in the 21st century, it's not right to suppress people who make a choice not to do so, but I think the right mechanism would be to support the ones who choose to stand up for the country. There are some first steps that are made with this bill, so hopefully maybe in 5 years there'll be more proper steps done. Whether it'll be peaceful time or military time, still we'll find a way to support those who are showing their passion for the country. I'm siding here with the need for radical reforms to support those who actually went. They should have different rights, they should have better benefits in the society, and they should have some different capabilities from those who didn't go. Better rights, better opportunities in life, but important not to bend it too far, because when we're giving benefits to the infantrymen, it's a thin line. How do you distinguish that person from, for example, a rescue service officer who is digging through the rubble of the buildings damaged, or doctors, or those teachers who are teaching kids at the frontline cities and haven't evacuated, or those who work on our energy lines, right? So this is a very delicate approach, and Ministry of Veteran Affairs should have more details on how to approach that, how to work with it. But it's the whole paradigm in the society. It's probably dependent on the long political vectors that will take us 10 to 20 years to change it, to learn to support those who are ready to sacrifice everything to serve the country. This is a big ship that needs turning. The attitude towards army, attitude towards people. One site, I'm trying to remember which one, recently published data about our reforms in Ukrainian Air Force. By 1991, we had 900 jets. By 2013, we only had 126. Understandably, our country would not be able to pull through and keep 900 operational, but it would make sense to have a couple hundred working, and then maybe another 100 in reserve that could be quickly refurbed, and perhaps additional units that could be used as spare parts. But stemming from the overall attitude to the army, like a mixture of slaughterhouse and a garbage bin over the last 30 years, we put ourselves in a very precarious position. I can't even imagine or remember, rather, any moment in the history of humanity when the country would disarm itself so much and expose to the militant enemies. This is the biggest stupidity, and I hope we'll learn from it. And it stems from the attitude to people as well. Because together with jets, there were all those professionals, all those people who worked on them, their lives were cut and trashed. And then we're surprised that some of them don't want to go serve back after they retired. It's difficult to restore their respect for the country that wiped its feet over them. And now they come to them asking, begging for help when a very critical time has come. So it's a very delicate, difficult thing to fix quickly. The attitude of military professionals who have got such a treatment from our country. And now we're facing it, and we'll have to find a solution, the cure. All right, it's a good time to remind our viewers that we're supporting Armed Forces of Ukraine, and we have a donation link at the bottom. Every time it's a new fundraiser. And today, by the way, is a very unique one. It's a different, sorry, Nikolai, for interrupting you. Today's fundraiser is for ground drones, the vehicles that can help evacuate wounded from the areas where people cannot reach to rescue their comrades. So these vehicles can get there and can get wounded out of there. So this, if you're hesitant about donating your money for military means, this fundraiser is for you, because this is evacuation medical vehicle to save people's lives. These vehicles can work even at night. It's very risky. There are a lot of risky areas where you need to evacuate people from the very front part of the engagement. And the easiest way to do that is to have some kind of vehicle like that. And to prevent people dying from not getting medical aid in time, this is an attempt to solve this problem. Such a platform can transport a wounded trooper to safety. So this is a very specific, very special fundraiser. Once again, if you have been hesitant about donating money for, as some people say, I'm not giving money for murder, especially outside of the conflict, outside of Ukraine, this fundraiser is specifically about saving lives. There is nothing war-related in it. So if you can, please help. Right, Alexey, there is a bunch of different inventions like this. Some brigades also actually participated in technical and engineering for these platforms. They're very technical and multifunctional, but their best way of use is to save lives of the soldiers of our country. So, going to some Russian agenda on this segment, Medusa published a big article that a year ago, politologist Karaganov suggested to conduct nuclear hits, preventative nuclear hits on the West. That led to, if we remember, you commented that situation, you commented the large framework in this relation, explaining that Russia was conducting that nuclear blackmail for quite a while, and now the doctrine is done with. So the question is, what is instead of it now? What can they use? At some point you said that Russia was feeling lost after facing Macron's statements. So where do you see they are going now? Where can they go with their thought, and what can they do? I don't think anything will change drastically, Nikolai. They are very impressed with what NATO is doing on their western borders. The decisions that apparently have been made, that are being taken in the framework of EU and NATO. So they have only two hopes. They're trying to use inner political squabble in the United States to weaken NATO and G7 and Ukraine as a result. And the second hope is to try to get to the moment when negotiations will start from some position of power. They need to get some results on the ground for that will provide them that strength, because they will try to push the negotiation line of freezing the front line, and for that they need to try to finish capturing Donetsk and Lugansk regions, as they're calling it, to liberate Donbass, in quotes. And they're also trying to speed this process up before the West gets stronger, because the West is starting to invest now, and if you give the West a couple of years, the overall position of the West versus Russia will be much more overwhelming. So perhaps the situation may last for another year, and they'll continue threats and attempts at blackmail, and at the same time they'll be pushing the negotiations button. we are ready, look, we're ready to discuss, you guys are too aggressive, NATO is aggressive, Ukraine is aggressive, we are ready to sit down and discuss. That's what they'll be presenting. Now the question is, as an element of blackmail, will they announce the threat of actually hitting the NATO territories? That's a big question. Until Macron's decision became public and he came first before any other country had enough guts to do that, before that statement by Macron, this was the base scenario for Putin, to elevate the blackmail threats. But now NATO, with Macron statement and with creating that operative command in Finland, close to the Baltic states, that indicates that NATO is getting ready for direct engagement with Russia. So I don't know if they have made any decision in this regard yet. I think they're still making their minds in Kremlin, whether they will continue trying to push for some achievements on the territory of Ukraine on the front, or will they try to provoke NATO to a degree that will not threaten Russia much. So perhaps open some battle activities in the Baltic countries. And that just shows that signals coming from Russia are not good. And they do have enough hotshots in Putin's regime who think that NATO will blink first and will not try to fight Russia. And they might actually go. I see that there's a probability that they will try to attack NATO and see what happens. And nuclear ultimatum, I think it has weakened. They're still in the decision-making zone. We'll see very soon in their rhetoric and their actions whether they have made their minds. For now, they're back at the drawing board. The initial scenario is broken. They need to think about something new. But their corridor of probabilities is limited and is very short. So there'll be probably the same scenario, maybe a little more expressed down to the actual hot conflict somewhere in the Baltics, I suspect. Or they'll continue brandishing weapons and threatening NATO and general blackmail all over. I also wanted to pay attention to one more thing, that in 24, Karaganov will be responsible for 8 polls commissioned by Putin and his administration. One of them is related to the practice of nuclear deterrence, and another one is a dialogue about developing a new concept of nuclear deterrence in a four-sided, four-lateral format. Russia, China, India, and Pakistan are being suggested. I'm not quite sure what do they mean theoretically with that new concept of nuclear deterrence. These 4 countries is an interesting pick. Well, Nikolai, this is an attempt to try to create some counterforce to NATO and to form some politics where there is a new framework of global South versus global West. But India and Pakistan, they're military opponents. They're actually at arms with each other. So it's a very curious proposition to put them together in such an organization. But they're trying. We can see that Putin's gang is trying to use the nukes of the global South as a deterrence for the global West. All right, so tell me, please, India's acceptance and considering Putin to be legitimate president after the election charade, do you think that is a very weak step on India's behalf, or what consequences does it carry? Well, India is in a very difficult situation, Nikolai. 54% of their armed forces are armed with Russian arms, Russian weapons. And they have conflicts with China, they have conflicts with Pakistan. So if Putin will discontinue their support, Russia's support to India militarily, they will face certain issues with their military capabilities. As a second factor, their population is growing. It's 1.5 billion already, taking over China's growth. And it's difficult to maintain this economy given that half of the population is below the poverty line. This is a very difficult situation they're in, so they have to conduct very balanced politics that would not allow for strategic or inner political fluctuations. A lot of things depend upon Russia, oil products and arms. So if India will come back to the politics of holding Putin, and resisting his influence, that'll be a long story. It's a strategic story to make sure we give India enough resource to do so. And as on the recent G20, there was discussion that India may replace China by 2050. India will be developing their position, keeping very reserved rhetoric and balancing on different sides. If you can notice, they acknowledge Putin's re-election, but they stopped buying Russian oil. So they will continue balancing. This is the whole sub-region, subcontinent that has its own logic of existence, and they need to maintain 1.5 billion people. That is, the population is growing rather actively. So they have a lot of other concerns. Given that they have two nuclear opponents, China and Pakistan, and having Iran that is in good relations with Pakistan and China. So India is in a very precarious position. That's why we should not be expecting anything brush from there. And given that they have more than a half of their arms exported from Russia, or imported into India from Russia, they will probably be very careful until they at least replace the armaments with the Western options, but it'll take at least several dozens years to do that. So that's roughly what we can expect from India. And there were interesting stories. You've seen some publications that there are some Indian shells used in the Ukraine artillery systems, but it's nothing they can make official statement about. So they're very delicate in balancing. And no reasonable politician will be brash in this situation. I should remind that India was leading the non-joining group during the Cold War times. They refused to join either West or Soviet bloc, and they always had rather good relations with USSR and now with Russia. So it's difficult to turn from these 70 years of politics. Even if they wanted to, that would take time. Well, listen, but with this, Indian elites have ambitions, and they see India as a country #1 in 20 years, right? Yes, they do think that in 2050 they'll overtake China and their economy. And Indians, they work very peculiarly. If, for example, China was fully copycatting Russian space program, literally copying, Indians from the beginning refused to do that. They were building their own national unique program. They have very unique carrier vehicle developed in India internally. They went a longer route, but it's much more perspective for them. They have very difficult politics that they have to work with. Current Prime Minister of India is also known for being a very heavy Hindu authority and Hindu culture and astrology and political and philosophy aspects. So when you have a teacher from a big letter T is also the chief political officer of the country, that is an interesting situation that induces India to create their own politics, implying a very complex balance between all the opponents and the need to grow and support their country. And as I said, just the dependence on the military nomenclature from Russia would preclude any sharp statements about Putin and his government coming from India. Right, the whole concept of the global south, Alexey, where India and China are present as key countries, is being criticized by Global Affairs. There was a publication recently where they said that the politics of the United States does not put enough attention to the events of the Global South, to the actions of Global South. And today they're making bets, or bets should be made on the big countries of the Global South, that the West needs to help grow Brazil and India within Global South as alternatives to China and others, and help smaller and medium-sized countries to try and integrate them deeper with these new leaders, like Brazil and India. But there is some criticism to this approach. It says that it discounts the needs of smaller countries of the Global South. What do you think should be the politics regarding that group of countries? Should we be betting more on India and Brazil, or should we be working, so to say, with everybody? So this is a macro-strategic decision, Nikolai, and it's difficult to advise globally, right, what should be done in this field. One can ask questions. Is the West capable of working with Brazil and India to a degree that they will aid them to grow? And is there a consolidation, is there a path to consolidate their position of these two countries? On G20, they announced that India will be grown to replace China, and there'll be a new trade route coming through India, avoiding China. So after that, there were a few conflicts ignited to prevent this possible new route from happening, so you can pay attention to who's interested in this. But all that rhetoric coming from essentially the idea that let's break BRICS apart. The West used to be breaking its opponents apart. How much can they do? I don't know. Can they follow this strategy? At first, they need to grow their authority back to where it should be, because the current statement by Taiwan already said that, clarified to the United States that if you will be supporting Taiwan the way you support Ukraine, you're not a good ally for us. The West is in its deepest and lowest position in terms of global capabilities. Their global authority is near zero, while Europe is awakening. United States is still sliding down. Even Israel is already saying that we need to review our relations with the United States. And U.S. authority is sliding deeper and deeper under Biden administration. That creates a certain vacuum. Authority over EU just starts to go up. But roughly speaking, if G7 will be able to show that they do not abandon their allies, they're ready to face the challenges of the same global South, then situation may get better. For now, most of these countries are very skeptical. In the BRICS, they're very skeptical about the capabilities of the West, because the West demonstrated over the last couple decades, it shows that they can do things like they did in Afghanistan. They can fail and they can abandon their allies like they're doing with Ukraine and creating hurdles with Israel as well. So why the heck do you need allies like that? So in order to even start propping Brazil and India, the West would need to start growing their authority again, start showing that they will really defend Ukraine, they'll really defend Taiwan. And then other countries might consider that, okay, but, well, we really have two sides to choose between, right? That the West is actually a side. Authority is such a thing that takes years to acquire, and you can lose it in one moment. So nothing is lost. There is still a lot of hope, but it's a long road. There's also a bunch of polls coming out of Russian Federation, Alexey, that I wanted to bring up today. During the last 10 years, the number of Russians who are considering that Russia is already one of the superpowers has grown 5 times. In 2013, only 10% thought that Russia is a superpower. And this year, in the end of 2023, over 50% answered positively to that. So do you think it's probably Russians trying to be proud of their country? And it's just that they're acquiring reasons to be proud of at the cost of destroying their neighbors. Do you think this correlation of considering your country the great, given that the country behaves like a barbarian in the world arena, how much do you think that can be estimated as becoming a barbarian, as barbarization of Russian citizens? Yeah, this is a deep barbarization. The problem is that people don't really have much options there. They've never seen better examples in their paradigm. They're sitting without toilet paper, without running water in their toilets in deep parts of Russia. But they're still working in the Soviet paradigm, which had victory in the Second World War as the biggest achievement. So all Russians, from academician to the lowest marginalized levels, they think that the country is great when it is going through some or conducting some great war. So we started a great war in 24, we are a great country. This is a very intricate correlation, but it is peculiarly curated through the basic national mythology. The best way to change that would be to lose this war. And I think that's where they're going. I think that's what God had chosen for them. Russians starting to have more conflicts at work. 48% of Russians said they never had conflicts with colleagues. A year ago, 49% did not have conflict. 3 years ago, 53% had no conflicts, and 5 years ago, 77% of Russians had no conflicts at work. 47% said they had no conflicts with leadership. A year ago, it was 51. 5 years ago, it was 77. So what do you think this indicates, that parameter? Well, if these numbers are to be trusted, then we can say that in the atmosphere of external aggression and inner terror that they're having now, there was a recent situation when a woman was ratted about to some court structure by her neighbor because she took a picture in a yellow jacket with a back blue sky in the background, as if a Ukrainian flag. And I loved her answer. She said, "I cannot control the color of the sky, and I have no money, thanks to you, to change my jackets too often." We see how worn out is the infrastructure. We see horrible treatment by some congressmen with their people. Orenburg and Orsk are getting drowned now because of the flood, because of the local authorities had stolen a lot of money from the dam that was supposed to be retrofitted. So Russians are facing total unknown looking into the future. They are getting more concerned, they're getting more fears. In the meantime, the propaganda towers are still working, who made their bet on hatred as the government and internal policies. And one can be surprised that it's only half of them are conflicting, that not 101% are in some sanitarium, because this is a country of madmen conducting mad politics. Yes, they're, of course, obviously super rational, but this is rationality of madmen. Unfortunately for Russian people, for those who still keep some sanity in this situation, we need to bow down to Alexander Rudенko, who was tortured to death in Russian prison, who returned over 1,000 Ukrainians out of Russia, who is living in Belgorod, a borderline city that gets hit sometimes by Ukraine. And you'd expect the attitude to Ukrainians would be different, but he was helping Ukrainians locally. He's a human with a big H there. And there are, even in the atmosphere of direct psychotization, just like Strugatsky brothers in their sci-fi were describing about the inhabited island, there are people who refuse to be part of that madness. But Russia overall is going mad, betting on that feature. I think 5 years from now, they'll have 101 or 121% of conflicts. They do have growing inner terror. They do have obvious external terror happening between them and their neighbors, and they're claiming all these categories of Satanism, of catechon, and all that happening on a very poor background. Breaking utilities, rather difficult climate. Russia is not in a tropical zone country, right? So all that with technical catastrophes and reluctance of power to address, repair anything. So this is a huge psychotic experiment ongoing over the whole country. That's why I'm calling it a psychotization. Russia went through all that under Stalin, and this is a long experiment that started back in the Bolsheviks' time. So unfortunately, is being repeated now under Putin. This is the country that has a role of showing the whole world how not to do, like Chadaev said back in the day, one of Russia's classics. You know, I also paid attention to the interview that Putin gave to Kisilov a week before so-called elections, so pre-electoral interview. There was so much posturing about incredible growth of infrastructure, new projects, 150 kilometers of roads in Sochi area. So Putin is displaying a lot of ambitions in the infrastructure that are not even a match to the size of his country or to modern trends. At the time when Saudi Arabia is building huge infrastructure projects, the city for 9 million people that will have a certain unique type of transportation, and Putin is talking with all that posturing about one road in Sochi. And the only special feature of this road is that it will be in a tunnel, as if tunnels is some engineering miracles. In the meantime, hundreds of thousands of people suffer from floods in his cities due to breaking infrastructure. Well, yeah, that's another thing. They'll build this tunnel, And the price of it will be probably equal to Trans-Siberian Railroad. Imagine yourself living in Russia. You know that you are powerless in front of the powers, in front of the government, that you can be squashed and your family can be broken, that you can do nothing. And his country is conducting the war where his relatives and friends are dying with unknown goals. On the TV, he hears that they're great, the country is great, and everybody is against them. Looking at that, just imagine yourself in this position. I don't know how some of them manage to retain their sanity. Because Putin and his regime are like black warlocks working on destroying his population. Only 50% have access to natural gas in Russia. This is a huge country with access that exports that gas to the global arena, but they have not managed to provide it to its own citizens, killing its own troops by tens of thousands, draining the economy down the toilet with unclear goals. And they're claiming that they're great when they have nothing to wipe their butt with. But we're great. So, I don't know. This is a very interesting psychopathological instrument of the government and civilizational scale, I would say. We'll see what the conclusion of that would be. I don't think it'll be anything good for them. Alexey Nikolaevich, thank you. We've been having some issues with the sound and the picture today. Apologies to our viewers. Right, I'm in the mountains in a very difficult to reach place. I'm glad we have even that here. Right, I'm having 10 people holding the antenna up on the roof just for us. Right, thank you so much for reaching out to us today. And we hope next time it'll be a little better in terms of connection. Yeah, next time I'll be down from this place. I'll be in a civilization again. Once again, a reminder that we support Armed Forces of Ukraine. Please find the link below that stream. Today we're doing the fundraiser for automated evacuation platforms that help wounded to be taken out from the places of engagement. We are handpicking these fundraising activities. We never touch the money. The money goes directly to the accounts of military requesting that, and they send us their confirmations with videos, and big, deep thanks to all of you who participate. Thank you to all. Thank you, Alexey, for joining us. Do not forget to subscribe. Do not forget to subscribe to the Privateer station if you are watching or listening that in English. Yes, a couple of words. Once again, guys, please support this fundraiser. If this experiment is successful, other brigades will copy that and will be able to save more lives on the front. Of course, we do. Thank you, Alexey. Have a quiet night. Goodbye.